Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk bugling. It's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's bugling 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations. So we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BSing, no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record
I
button?
thought I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something? Corey, good afternoon.
Hi, Randy.
How are you?
Oh, man. It is mid-September, and elk are bugling. The Peak Rut's about to kick in. I couldn't be any better.
Really? So in this series that we're now doing September 15th through the 21st. And I got on my phone here, I have the Elk 101 article you wrote. And I'm trying to see as I read this, could you be any more excited in 2025? I mean, if you were trying to hide your excitement for the third week of the month, you're not doing a very good job in this article out there at elk101.com.
I know, and we'll see because, the next 7 or 8 days are going to see if I was right or not. But it's been a long time, and I don't remember if we've ever had an alignment of so many great things that contribute to the elk rut happening on the same calendar year, and they all come together this next week.
Yeah. Yeah, that's too bad.
We'll probably get some extreme heat or fires will shut down areas or something like that. But if the weather cooperates and does what it normally does during the third week and things just align here, this
Yeah.
should be, I mean, this is the week that I've put all the eggs in my basket as far as the week that I've taken for the hunt that I'm most excited for.
Yeah. So if you had a really special Wyoming elk tag that you could hunt with a bow the whole month of September, but your mother's birthday is on September 18th, would you go to the birthday party or would you go elk hunting?
Man, flowers.com is your friend on September 18th. You can order birthday flowers one day and the next day order I'm sorry flowers that I wasn't at your birthday. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, what they call that mixed emotions, right? So my
I
hope
don't
is
know.
that I got the tag filled before then, so then I don't have to buy 3 truckloads of flowers to cover my guilt for being out in the elk woods on September 21st or 18th
Uh,
or whatever. But
if
anyhow,
you'd have said your wife's birthday, that would cause a little bit more reason to pause there. But mom at this
yeah,
point, I think understands,
yeah,
hey, this is, I will give you 5 days, a little bit later on in the calendar
yeah.
in exchange
Well,
to be out there and miss your birthday.
I did that. Christmas is like my mom's gig. That's what
Yeah.
mom lives for.
Yep.
But going to Duluth, Minnesota in December sucks.
But Randy, it's a trade-off to be able
I
to be in
know.
the Elkwoods on September 18th, which if I have to pick a day that is going to be magical this year, it would be September 18th.
Wow. All right. Happy birthday, Mom.
Yep. Here's a picture of my bull.
Well, anyhow, we're doing this series, and I think it's going really good.
I like it.
Yeah. So we did September 1st through the 7th, September 8th through the 14th. Today, September 15th through the 21st. When we talked about last time, we were just coming off the quarter moon. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean we're into the so we've got the new moon on I believe the 22nd,
21st.
20,
21st. Yep.
21st. Yep. So new
Yep.
moon's on the 21st. So the very end of this week it will be absolutely dark, which means this next week will be going from minimal light to no light at night,
Yeah.
which is going to force the elk to be active longer during daylight hours, which is what we want as hunters because the more active they are during daylight, the more opportunity we have to chase them.
Yeah. We talked about last week that compared to the first week of September when the bigger bulls are just kind of staging nearby and letting the younger guys do all the work. Last week, the big bulls started showing up saying, I'd hate to have to whoop you, but
But
I
I'm here
would
to
if I
do
have
that.
to. So at this point, when you get to September 15th-ish, somewhere in there, is it safe to say that if you got big groups of cows or even, 10 cows, there's probably going to be one of the older bulls in charge at this point?
They will be showing up this week to be in charge if they aren't already there. Yep.
Yeah.
This is the week when the big bulls know I'm not sitting on the sidelines any longer.
Yeah. You mentioned the prior week, especially the first week was almost like preseason. This is like the playoffs.
Yeah.
It goes from preseason to the playoffs in the course of about 7 or 8 days.
Yep.
And this is there's plenty. Is it safe to say that at this time these bulls that hold these cows are super aggressive and are not going to put up with anyone being nearby to the
Yep.
extent that they're tough enough to enforce the rule?
Yep, they're getting very protective now. They don't want an intruder getting close to the cows because during this week there will be cows that come into estrus. There will be cows that get bred during this week, and the big bulls, the mature bulls, the breeding bulls know that, and they
Okay.
don't want another bull coming in and taking ownership of the cows. They don't want to take a chance of missing out on that. So they've gone from no breeding activity really for the last 11 months and 2 weeks to it's all taking place over the next 2 weeks here. And they know that. And so this
Yeah.
is kind of the front end of that where they'll get run down towards the end. It'll be like just another annoying bull running around out there. I'm so focused. But right now, they're this is like the perfect storm. And I always utilize a couple things here. First, the fall equinox that lands on September 22nd. And so as the daylight hours get shorter on the 22nd of September, they're going to be equal to the nighttime hours. So the hours of darkness are going to equal the hours of daylight on September 22nd. That decrease in daylight is what triggers the cows to come into estrus. So it's usually within 3 or 4 days of the fall equinox that the cows start coming into estrus. And it can go either direction, but I always kind of use that 3 days, 4 days ahead of the fall equinox is when things get real. And so that's why I said this the 18th of September is it should be magical. That's when the cows will start estrus cycles, the bulls will start breeding, the days leading up, so the 15th to the 18th, 19th, 20th, somewhere in there, they're going to be super aggressive. They're going to be super protective. They're going to be super territorial, and they're not going to be completely locked in on breeding yet. So that's why I really think this third week is the week. Typically, on every season, I would say the third week is going to be the best week for having efficiency in calling in bulls. The fourth week, the intensity ratchets up even more than this. The vocalization, the bugling, the chaos that takes place 24 hours a day now gets even better. But you have a trade-off there, and that is the bulls are going to be focused on breeding, and they're going to be a little bit more difficult to pull away from the herds. So the third week is kind of the best of all the worlds combining. And this year, we get the benefit of no moon during pretty much the entire third and fourth week.
Yeah. So this week here, say an older bull's come in, he ran, you know, peg leg Pete out of there and said, "Pal, I hate to tell you this, but I'm taking these gals. And if you want to fight about it, this could be bad for a three-legged elk like you." Uh, but is there any chance that the victor, who got the spoils of victory, it sounds like there's still some chance because of how aggressive he is, and it's not the full-on estrus cycle. You might have a chance of pulling him slightly away from his cows, at least to come and challenge or to come and look or
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what makes this week so great is they're not locked in on breeding yet, so they are willing to leave their cows and come in 200 yards. They're still very protective of their cows and they don't want another bull coming in and stealing a cow off, but they will turn and come into a fight still. By the fourth week, it's a little bit more difficult. They're going to lock in and you can scream all the challenges and insults you want, but that bull, if he's got a hot cow, is probably not going to come into fight at that point. He's already established the dominance. He's already got the cows. They're ready to be bred. It's a little too late to get mouthy at that point. So this week, the third week, he's still susceptible to that. Plus, you have all of these other 6 points that have been with the herd for the last week and a half, 2 weeks that thought they were the herd bull. They just got proven wrong, and probably they didn't even have to fight about it. They're like, "Oh yeah, he is big," or he might have just turned and ran them down the hill a ways. Now they're sitting down there stewing, going, "I had made all these plans for the next 2 weeks that just got canceled instantaneously here, and I am not happy about that. I bought flowers, I did all this, and now I'm standing here with no dates, with no prom to go to." And they will fight at the drop of a hat now. So during this third week, you also get not only the mature herd bulls willing to come in and fight, you have all of these other sub-mature bulls that are still probably a pretty decent mature representation of a herd bull there that don't have a herd. They're willing to come running to cow calls. They're willing to take a chance of fighting to say, I thought I had it. I used to have a herd. Now I don't. I'm going to go and reclaim a herd. So you have them willing to fight. Now you have all the young bulls going, there is chaos everywhere. This is the most exciting party I've ever been invited to. I'm going to go running in. So you just have a lot of really great things if you're into listening to elk bugling and setting up and having elk come into your setups. This is going to be the week.
yeah. So you've said in the previous 2 weeks that you're probably going to start with cow calls, maybe a little quieter, maybe then crank that up a little bit. And then if that doesn't work, maybe some sort of bugling. Still kind of a similar sequence.
Yeah, and again, I think you can get away with a little bit more aggression this week. The bulls are going to respond to aggression, but they're also, like I mentioned, you've got bulls that just lost their cows that are going to hear a cow call and be like, "Okay, there it is. She just, she invited me to prom. Go and hang out with her." And so you've got a lot of that going on. So there's no reason to get aggressive because there will be some bulls that have been beat up a couple times this week that they're going to maybe end up starting to be a little bit more timid. Uh, I don't see a lot of timid bulls during this week, just from a natural biological standpoint. They are wired to, this is the week when you get aggressive. This is the week when you take chances. This is the week when, if you're going to let your guard down and not pay attention to the wind or to all these different senses that keep you alive the other 51 weeks of the year, this is the week that happens.
Hmm. So temperature wise, hopefully it's a little more moderate temperature wise than it was 2 weeks ago, because we're losing daylight faster and
Yep.
sun's
So,
getting further south in the hemisphere.
yep.
uh,
More consistent thermals because of that. So you don't have sometimes the first week it's so warm out, you get up in the morning and the thermals are already rising just because the ground temperature didn't cool off enough to change the air temperature direction. By now, with, like you mentioned, the daylight hours are getting shorter. The sun is no longer directly overhead. The ground just doesn't warm up as much, and that means it cools down more at night. So you do get more of a contrast in thermals. You get more of that diurnal change at the normal time taking place. Even if the weather is generally a little bit warmer for the third week of September, you're still going to have the nighttime cool down, which is going to give you more consistent thermals in the morning and again in the evening. So thermals are going to be working in our favor. The elk have to stay out feeding a little bit longer. When the bulls get to their bedding area during the middle of the day, they do not want competition or company coming in there. So everything is lending toward this week being really good. Couple of caveats. First one is hunting pressure. More people are probably going to be taking vacation time during the third week than during the first week. So there's going to be more activity in the woods. There have also been 2 preceding weeks, and by the end of this week, 3 preceding weeks of all of this activity bumping elk. And hunters that don't pay as much attention to the wind as they should have walked into setups with the wind going right to the elk while they were bugling, and now the elk are getting more and more educated. So we do have to contend with that the elk have been bumped, they have been educated, they're a little bit wiser. There is that balance of they're dumb in the rut, so hopefully that's enough to counteract the education they've received at our expense for the last 3 weeks.
Uh, so a lot of times you just can't catch that group of elk that are heading up the hill. You can't get in front of them. You didn't dare be above them because the thermal was coming down, and that's part of why they like to go uphill in the morning. They go in bed. Any plan, any strategy, any tactic? Because sometimes you'll hear that guy up there. Yeah, every once in a while, he'll just let out a bugle, just I don't know, he's bored or the hormones have got
Yep.
him wound up, and he's in some sort of frenzy there. What's it happens enough that it seems like it'd be great if there were some, I don't know, predictable or consistent tactics that give you a little more of an advantage. Because when they're in their bed, every elk, from the cows to the bulls, they know exactly where to bed based on where the wind direction is and based on the time of day. They live there. They know every place. Oh yeah, the wind funnels through this little gap right here when it's out of the west southwest. So we're just gonna go over here. And it's really hard once they get bedded because they know the wind and they know the landscape so good. What's the plan?
It's, and this goes to, and we've talked about it. It might sound a little bit like the tactic is on repeat during every week of the elk rut here, but midday this week is going to be money. Yes, and it's for all the reasons that we've talked about. You mentioned the bulls are heading uphill. They're following the cows. The cows are the ones that are, there's 8 cows, 10 cows. They're like, hey, this is our schedule. This is the itinerary. And we're not varying from it because if we do, we die. And we're not willing to die. We need to have calves. We need to protect them for the next 6 months so that they can be born and there can be more elk. That is what their purpose is, they want bread and they want to protect those calves and they want to stay alive, and they spend every action, every minute of every day is centered on staying alive. So they've got their schedule, and that bull who is, in his mind, he's got his own itinerary, he's got his own agenda here. It doesn't matter what he wants. If it ties into with what the cows are already doing, then perfect.
Well,
It's going to work
yeah,
out. But
yeah.
the cows are not going to change their activity from going from those lower elevations in the morning up to their bedding area and bedding down. That's how they stay alive. So they're moving up the mountain with purpose. And like you mentioned, getting that bull to turn as he's following them there, as badly as he wants to come back and fight you, as badly as he thinks that those cows that he hears behind him would be a great addition to the herd he has, he knows that if he turns and leaves, those cows keep moving. They don't stop and wait. Like, they don't look at their watch, like, you got 15 minutes and then we're going to start moving again. It's, you go do your thing if you want to, but we're moving up the mountain. And that just puts him at risk of losing those cows to another bull that slips in and runs them off. Now he's got to go find them. Now he's got to go fight for them. It's just a lot easier to stay with the cows moving up the mountain. So it can be difficult, even during this third week, to get that bull to turn and come in. The closer you get, the more he's going to be like, okay, 200 yards, I can sacrifice that. I'm going to come in, run you off real quick. Then I'll catch back up from 400 yards. He's, whole different ball game. So same principle applies. So once they get to their bedding area, those cows are no longer on the move. And that bull wants to protect them. He is in his safe spot in that bull bedroom bedding area where now it's not only a territorial thing. He doesn't want another bull there, He wants his cows to feel safe and not be up on the move. So he wants them to bed down. He wants them to not move. He can go and check them a lot easier, and he's going to protect them. So that's when, as a hunter, we want to get on their level, let them settle into their bedding area, give them an hour so things get quiet. And then, like you mentioned, that bull will just respond. He might not even respond to you. He just lets out a bugle to say, I'm king of the mountain today. Things are going my way. The cows are all here. Cows are great. I love life. He's chill. He's in his element. And when you hear that, you don't even have to bugle back. You just go quiet. You slip up there. You know where he was. He's not moving middle of the day. So that's the beauty of, you hear a bugle in the morning and you run up to where that bugle's from and you bugle again. He might bugle from a mile away. He's already moved, and they can move so much faster than us. In their bedding area, he's not moving. He is there, and he is going to be laying right under that same tree he just bugled from 30 minutes earlier. So we move in as quietly as we can. We get on his level so that he's not above us or below us. That helps with a lot of different things: thermally, physical disadvantage for the elk, visual advantage for the elk, all these things. We talked about it in the last episode. But you get in there, and an elk, when they're in their bedding area, they're not worried about danger that's 400, 500 yards away. They're worried about danger that's 200 or 300 yards away. So you can get away with a little more noise. It's not like you're tiptoeing from 500 to 300 yards. You don't want to break branches. You don't want to alert them that anything's coming, but they're pretty relaxed in that setting as long as you have the wind good. They're listening for danger approaching them from above, or they're watching an open hillside from above, and then they're using their noses for anything that might be trying to come in from below them. But from a side hill perspective, they don't have an advantage with the wind. They can't see nearly as good looking side hill as they can looking up or down. So you've got that advantage. As long as you're relatively quiet, it's pretty easy to get inside 300 yards of a bull elk that's bedded. You'd have to make a mistake to alert them that you're coming. And that's really all you need. If you can get inside 300 yards and get set up where there's a good game trail for that bull to just naturally get up, walk straight across the hill and come in, he's probably going to do that because he wants to protect his cows. He is in his safe spot, and his cows aren't on the move. So this third week, obviously I'm going to be out joining in the chaos that takes place from 6:40 a.m. until 9 o'clock a.m. when they make it to their bedding area, whatever the times
Right.
are. There's going to be 2 or 3 hours of really good bugling, a lot of vocalization and activity taking place. But then things are going to slow down and die off into the bedding areas into mid morning, and I'm going to be there. And I'm going to take my boots off, and I'm going to eat some trail mix and a jerky stick, and I'm just going to rub my fingers together waiting, because midday madness during the third week this year is going to be incredible.
So tell me again, we on the last episode we kind of gave the Midday Madness overview. Tell me how it's going to work in week 3,
Yeah.
September 15th to the 21st.
200, 250 yards away from the bedded bull with his herd. Um, Keeping in mind, again, a very generalized statement. They're going to bed somewhere halfway up the mountain to 3/4 the way up the mountain on a north face, where there's a little bit of a just topographical change, whether that goes from steep hill to a flat bench, whether that's a saddle. Saddles are nice because it pulls the thermals up from 2 different draws and the ridge out of that saddle. So they're getting a lot of scent coming up to them, and they have escape routes either direction. So saddles are great, benches are great, but that's where they're hanging out. So we get in there, we get set up, we find these perfect areas where a bull can just walk into as comfortable. Thinks that he's protected visually, he's close to his bedding area, he's got an escape route that he can retreat on. It's not too brushy, so he's not making a lot of noise. We've got plenty of cover for drawing our bow and good shooting lanes. We've taken the time to find this setup. We didn't, have to rush into, this is what we're left with. The bull's already on his way. We have to just find a setup here. We're in control. So we get in that setup, and we know that bull's 200, 250 yards away. And I give the nod to the caller, and the caller gives a cow caller too. I always like 2 cow calls. And the reason why, we did our elk camp events the last week of July, first part of August, and we demonstrated, simulated calling situations. And I was the elk on the last day, and the attendees were the hunter and the caller and the students in this, and they had to call me in. And it was amazing. I could hear the first cow call, but I couldn't pinpoint it. But the second one, once it got my attention with the first one, I could pinpoint right where it came from. And I have no doubt that elk are very similar. They hear one cow call and they think, okay, that good chance that was a cow call, but I don't know for sure where it came from because I wasn't ready for it. But you give one cow call and then 2 seconds later you give another one. They heard the first one, they keyed in. Now they hear the second one and they know exactly where it's at. So I like to give 2 to 3 cow calls to get them started. Then I know they heard it. And if they hear it during this next week, they should respond. Then again, there are reasons they won't. If there's a lot of predators in the area, if there's been a lot of hunting pressure, it might take a little bit more to coax a response out of that elk. But I just want him to respond. And it can be he's bedded. A lot of times when they're bedded, they just give that wimpy little bugle. Even a big bull sometimes will give a wimpy little bedded bugle just because they don't take a full lung full of oxygen. They aren't standing up. It's just, it's almost a sigh. They'll sigh and let you know that I'm over here. And yeah, and that's all I want. That's all I need. And I'm going to give him a couple more rounds of those cow calls again, staying timid here because it might be enough. He might be like, yeah, it's worth me getting up out of my bed and going to this cow to bring her back over here. And you might the next time he bugles, he might have cut the distance in half and he's on his way. Just keep giving him that. But if he stays there 3 times and responds 3 times from his bed and hasn't moved, I'm going to trip the trigger and I am going to light him up in a way that if you thought he couldn't resist it the first week and the second week, this week is full throttle reaction from the bull and he can't control it. So we're going to give him those cow calls. He's going to respond. We're going to be quiet for a minute or two. We're going to give him cow calls. He's going to respond. And then when we're ready to hit him, I used to say cut him off. And I know a lot of other people, when you get aggressive with bugling, they're like, you want to cut him off. And I think if you can cut him off, there is an advantage to that. Uh, but the problem I run into is when I cut a bull off a lot of times, my challenge is so abrupt and so aggressive that a lot of times I finish it and I hear him still chuckling and he didn't hear the full challenge. So I like to wait until he finishes. And the second he finishes his bugle, then I hammer him with the challenge. And the challenge bugle is going to, it, you can't even, you don't even have to describe the sound of it. Just know that you are putting all of the anger and aggression you can into a bugle at that bull. You're screaming at him. You're telling him, hey, it's you and me on the mountain today, and this one cow that's at stake here is going to be settled over you and I getting together and tangling up here. So you just have to, there's not a language. There's not a certain chuckle or a glunk or a certain pitch you have to hit. You just throw everything plus the camp sink in the mix here and let that bull know this is a fight. I just issued a challenge for you to show up here and fight. And whatever it takes when you're putting that pressure on the diaphragm call, you make sure that you're demonstrating and communicating to him that emotion. And I mean, this third week, when you do that, this is when you hear the air come out of the woods. This is when you hear 4 distinct hooves hit the ground. He elevates into the air and his feet hit the ground, and most of the time it's churning up dirt coming your way because everything that he doesn't like just happened all at once right there. And you can hear he's not careful about coming through broken branches. He's not careful about, you know, trees that are in his way. He's tearing trees out of the ground. You can hear him breathing coming down the hill. Every time his foot hits the ground, you can hear lung air coming out. And draw your bow and be ready.
Yeah. So going back to that sequence a little bit, you did these series of cow calls and he laid there in his bed, responded with a kind of sigh bugle. And you say, all right, I'm going to get him up. I'm going to get him challenged. Do you do it from the same location or do you try to move closer once you say, I'm going to take the top off here?
I've got a good setup right there. If I move closer, I don't know what I'm moving into, and I might move forward and be like, that setup back there was better. I can't go back at that point because when the bull gets to the point I just walked to and smells where I stood, he's gone. So once I move forward, I've got to commit to that location. And if I have a good setup at this point during the third week, I don't think 200 yards versus 275 yards is going to make a lot of difference in this. 200 versus 400 is going to make a difference. But once I find that setup, I'm not moving ahead from cow calling to issuing the challenge.
There's times where I'm like, I got to get closer. I got to get closer. And I get 100 yards. And all of a sudden I do something stupid. And all of a sudden, all I hear is just, thump, 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 sounds like herd of buffalo taking off. Well, there's a herd of elk taking off. And I
Yeah.
screwed it up because there is always, if you ever look at how cows bad and orient themselves, they've got every lane of visibility covered. One
Yeah.
of them does. And they're all probably close to the same consistent wind patterns based on the thermal and the prevailing wind. Uh, but it's really hard. You're trying to sneak in and get closer on a dozen animals. That's a lot different than that raghorn that you saw, on September 2nd, who was over there. He doesn't have a lot of wits about him anyhow. These cows have saved more bulls. It just how it works, and
Yeah.
so I always want to emphasize how close you need to be or don't need to be. That's good to hear that you don't need to be as close as I sometimes flounder into.
Yeah. So we talked early season when the bulls are in their bull bedroom. Sometimes you have to push in a little bit and get close, but then they're by themselves. They aren't with cows typically. In the fourth week, which we're going to talk about in the next episode, they're locked in on cows. So if you want to pressure them when they're on the move or when they're in a meadow with cows around them, you've got to break that barrier. You've got to get in as tight as you can. And sometimes there is a big difference between 100 yards or 170 yards. So, you got to take a little bit more risk then. During this third week, though, 200, 250 yards is plenty sufficient to send the message you want to send and get the reaction you want to get out of that bull.
Yeah, water a valuable tactic this time of the season, as much so as earlier in the year or earlier in the season.
Yeah. I mean, the bulls are going to be very active. They're going to be, heating up for sure. They're going to have the benefit of hopefully cooler weather. So they aren't going to be as reliant on needing to go to a wallow, but they're also going to be more worked up and more active. So wallows are still going to be active. They're still going to be a good bet. The bulls are still willing to leave their cows for a little bit and go a little distance. So if there's a wallow close to a bedding area, can be a place to set up. But realistically, elk should be vocal. And if they're vocal, I'm not wasting time just sitting static, hoping a bull comes wandering into me. I'm going to be a lot more mobile trying to find that vocal elk. So this is the week when we're putting miles on, and just knowing if there's an elk in the area, he's probably going to be more likely to be vocal this week. And if I'm not hearing bugles, I probably need to get over the next ridge.
Yeah. So you ever call in the dark before daylight?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the night before is a great time to call in the dark and locate a bull and then be there in the morning rather than getting up 3 or 4 hours early in the morning and going out there. Because the problem with doing it too early in the morning is when that bull responds, if he responds and he happens to be 300 yards away, and it's not daylight yet, there's a
Yeah.
chance he might come in and you can't do anything with it. And then there's a chance that he's going to smell you. And so I don't like getting into an elky area too early during this time. I want to show up there at daylight. And if that's 4 miles back in, that means I have to get up quite a bit earlier and hike in the dark to get back there. But I'm not really doing a lot of locating pre hunt in the morning.
Yeah. So with that, you're hearing a lot more bugles this time of year.
Yeah.
Do you go, all right, I called into this basin. I just heard three bulls down there, which happens at times this time of year.
Well, I'd like
And
to
they're,
know where because I'll be there. Three bulls
do,
is, yeah.
do you pick or choose, or is it possible for you to determine, hey, here's the guy who has the cows? Because the odds are, if there's one basin and there's 3 bulls, there's one group of cows, and one of them is in charge, and the other 2 are walking around frustrated as they can be, saying, well, if I scream at him loud enough, maybe he'll give up. But he ain't giving up. So do you, how do you play something like that? You kind of can tell over if you listen long enough that, okay, here's the guy with the cows.
Well, the first thing that you always have to remember when you get one response or 10 responses is ask yourself, what are the thermals doing? Because I don't want to go after the one that sounds the biggest and the baddest on the mountain at the expense of the other 2. And so if I, approach the one and in so doing blow the other 2 out and they smell me, those are no longer an option. And so I always take into account, what are the thermals doing? I need to make sure and move in a way that's not going to bump any of these elk. And I'm probably going to start with the first one and call it in. Try to call it in, even though it might not be sounding like the king of the mountain. It might not be sounding like it's overly aggressive. I'm just going to pick them off one by one in the order that the thermals dictate. If I'm in a trophy area and if one of them does sound like a big bull and the other 2 are just whiny little squeakers, I'm okay bumping those elk, recognizing that if I bump them and they run to the herd, they're going to take the herd with them. The herd's going to know there's danger. So I have to be strategic in how I bump them and which direction I go in there. So again, I have to play the thermals to make sure that I'm not just pushing all of them in the direction I want to go and hunt later on.
But also in some of those glory tag units, satellite bulls are really, really nice bulls that pretty much any archer would almost shiver in their boots if they had a chance to take a
Yeah.
shot at one of those. So
Well, you just think a 330 type bull is a satellite bull in a lot of those units, where the 350, 360, or even bigger bulls are the herd bulls. They're the ones that just beat up the 320 and 330 bull that's now a satellite bull that still thinks he's the king of the mountain, and by all rights, anywhere else he would be. So he still has the same attitude. He's just now without cows and without a fight. So he's a lone bull looking for a fight, and yeah, those ones can sometimes come in awful quick.
I shoot those ones or shoot at
That's
those
right.
ones.
I don't
So
know. You've told me about your practice this summer, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of shooting
oh,
at elk this year.
well, I hope you're right, Corey. I've went out of my way to do all these specific exercises and bow. If I miss, it is purely because I got excited. And this is the other part. I get excited when I hear a bugle close by. I don't care if I'm rifle hunting or archery hunting. I look down and I'm like, man, how do I control the shivers and the shakes here?
Yeah. No, and that's
But that's
as
why
you
I
were.
do it.
Yep. As you were talking earlier about getting inside that 200 250 yards, getting set up, cow calling, the bull answers, cow call, the bull answers. When I know what's about to come, when I know that I'm about to unleash the challenge on that bull, I get butterflies in my stomach because of just that anticipation. That is for me, obviously, when that bull comes in and steps into the shooting lane, that's kind of the peak of the excitement.
Yeah.
But right before I issue that challenge for the first time, and I know that that bull's not going to be able to resist this, I get those butterflies in my stomach because of, and like you said, that's what keeps pulling me back. I'm looking for that interaction. And I've said it before that I'm not a trophy hunter. Yeah, I want to hunt big bulls. And if a big bull's in front of me, I'm going to shoot it. But for me, it's more the size of the fight that I have with the bull than the size of the antlers when the bull finally shows up. And if I have to, if we're cutting each other off and screaming and I'm putting that emotion in there, I'm building up anger towards that bull. And when he steps in, he might just be a 5x5, but he's gonna get the arrow.
Well, one of the problems I always have is I think they're further away than they really are.
Yeah.
And I end up too close sometimes. I'm like, well, I got to sneak through here, and then I'm going to use this wind when I get set up over there. And then I'm like, uh-oh, that guy's only 70 yards away, and I don't have a place to set up. How stupid was this?
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm so bad at that. That's
So there's, and we did a full activity at the elk camp event, learning how to judge distances to bugles, and we demonstrated. I had two quote unquote elk out on the mountain, and with radios, I'd say, "Okay, Sam, go ahead and bugle facing us." And now walk 10 yards away over the backside of a ridge and face away from us and bugle. And to see people's faces light up with, like, oh my goodness, that sounded like he was in another county and he was only 10 feet away from where he just bugled from, is super helpful. But then it's also helpful to identify the different sounds that you hear when an elk bugles. If an elk is, you know, facing you in bugles and then he stands in the same place and turns away, it's going to sound different, but you can almost tell the location hasn't changed. If he's on the backside of a ridge that's just 150 yards away, it might sound audibly exactly the same as if that bull was 400 yards away across the canyon from you, but you're going to hear different things in that bugle, like the echo. When you hear a bull facing away in a draw and he bugles, you're going to hear the echo after the bugle. If he's straight across line of sight from you and he's 400 yards away, there's not going to be that same echo that you hear. So there's little things you can pick up on in the bugle to determine he's straight line of sight from me. And that tells me he's a little farther away. Or I heard an echo there and it's muffled because there's a ridge 80 yards in front of me. He might just be on the backside of that ridge. And, it can be hard to tell if he's 20 yards down off the backside of a ridge or if he's 400 yards down in the bottom of that next draw off the backside of the ridge. But you can usually get a little bit of an indication of he's closer than he sounds, or he's still a ways away. And I think, we talk about hunting Roosevelt elk on the Oregon coast. You want to talk about misjudging how far away an elk is. When we'd hear a bugle, it would sound like, in my experience with Rocky Mountains and even in heavy timbered areas with Rocky Mountain elk, I'm thinking that bull's 300 yards away and he was actually 90 yards away. And it's just
Wow.
because of the sound gets absorbed by all the dense vegetation there, that it just swallows up sound and makes it sound like it's distant when it's really right there in front of you.
Huh. Well, I've never done that. So a guy with my impaired hearing, I better bring just a, hey, you're coming with me because you're going to listen.
Randy will be out there with one of those great big cone funnels stuck in his ear, just turning it, trying to hear.
Yeah, but so we're getting towards like at the end of this week. It is just going to be the the planets have aligned in all respects.
Yeah.
Is it if you aren't hearing bugles, are you just packing up and moving just because, like, if they were here, I'd hear them. So why waste this precious 3, 4, 5 days in places where there are no elk? Because I see guys go fishing and they fish where there are no fish.
And
It's
they
like,
stay there all day.
yeah, 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 they're fishing in 15 feet of water. The fish are out at 30 feet. It's like, why'd you waste your whole day doing that? And here, if you're lucky, they're going to tell you if they're there or not. So how much time do you give a spot if you aren't hearing elk this time of year?
Yeah. And there's two things. If you aren't hearing elk this week, it probably means there aren't elk there. Or it might mean there are elk there that aren't very vocal. And if there are elk during the third week of September that aren't vocal, there's a problem. And that problem is either hunting pressure or predators, namely wolves. But there's an issue if there is an elk that's tight lipped during the third week of September. And rather than try to figure out what to do to overcome that or trying to, analyze the obstacle that's in front of you, I'm just moving. I'm going and finding an elk that's vocal, because if I want to call that elk in, which is my whole goal, and it gives me the better chance of getting a good shot. When a bull comes into my setup, I'm static. The bull is mobile. He's coming into my setup. It gives me the best chance for a good shot. If I have to go and chase a bull, or a bull is coming in timid and taking 6 steps and stopping and scanning the area and then 6 more steps, he's going to see, he's going to hear, he's going to smell. My chances go down. So I want a bull that loses his mind, comes into fight. And if I'm not hearing bugles, I'm leaving and going to find it. So realistically, during this time of year, an area gets one shot, one morning hunt or one evening hunt. And if I don't hear bugles, I'm in a new area. And it might just be, one drainage over. It might be the backside of that ridge, but I'm not hunting that same basin again the next day.
Well, that's one of the things that I often hear from people is, man, we know elk were in there and we couldn't locate them. Well, if it's September 18th, 20th, and you can't hear them, you know, it's not like you're leaving elk to find elk at that point.
And you might be, but you're leaving non-vocal elk to find vocal elk, which is important when it comes to calling.
Yeah. So don't waste those days because a lot of people got their plan or, this is every year we get into them in this basin. Well, maybe it's a drought year or it's a wetter year or whatever, and the cows are feeding somewhere else. You can say they should be in here, but if they're not, let the elk tell you where you should be.
Yeah.
Because you only have so many days in this premium window that we're talking about. You don't want to waste that.
No. And
Thinking,
how do I find elk? With a bugle tube. All your scouting, e-scouting, everything, it's helpful. It might lead you to an area, but it goes out the window this week because the elk are going to be where you find them with your bugle tube. So I'm doing my scouting on the fly. I'm finding a ridge. I'm hiking it as far as that ridge will take me, and I'm blowing location bugles off of both sides of it. And when I hear a response, I know there's an elk right there, right now, and that's the elk I'm hunting. I'm not going to spend time guessing where the elk are or hoping that they're in an area. I'm going to go and find the elk this week.
yeah. It's interesting that you say that, and I'm going to bring it up. I can prove that what you just said is how you operate. Uh, I've all the times I've been with you, the many days and miles, you've never said, "Oh, let's not go after that one. He sounds wimpy." If we heard a bugle, it's like, I don't care if there's grizzly bears down there. I don't care how steep it is, how far it is. We're going to find out.
Yeah.
Do you go after pretty much every bugle that you
Every
hear?
bugle. Every bugle. Yeah, that's what I'm there for. And I love antlers. I love big antlers. But it's not my focus. And for somebody that is, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, the focus is calling that bull in. And I don't care if it's a immature 3x4 or a giant 7x8. I just want to have that interaction with. I want that experience of seeing that bull bugle 30 yards in front of me broadside and deciding, is that the bull I'm going to shoot today?
Yeah, well, we went down in Montana. We heard a bull bugle, and I'm like, I've been down in there. That's the worst grizzly bear nest on this side of Yellowstone. Was Corey, you say? Oh, well, we can sneak down in there. And then we sneaked down in there, and fortunately, the bull that came in was a young bull, and he decided not to shoot, for which I was extremely grateful. Because climbing out of there wouldn't have been any fun, especially coming back for the next loads with grizzly bears. But
I don't remember you sharing your gratitude with me when I passed that bull up. If you had a feeling of gratitude there, it was clouded by your frustration and your amazement that anybody would just draw back on a bull and let down and smile. And you're like, what's going on?
uh,
We're here.
yeah, yeah, there was kind of that, but I kind of kept it quiet. How relieved I was, but we weren't backing a bull out of there because one of my grizzly bear encounters in Montana in archery season was just a ridge slightly to the east of. Well, it forms that basin we were in, but
Yep.
my point is, when Corey, he's not just saying this. When he hears a bugle, it's like, boom, off we go. And if that works out or doesn't work out, okay, then we'll go find the next bugle and we'll chase that one. And so that's also part of why you probably have more encounters than the average person, because a lot of
Yeah,
people
and
I've heard people say, "Oh, I heard some bugles, but they're little guys. I wasn't gonna go chase those."
yep. And encounters are really what you need to fill a tag. One encounter a season is not going to get it done most of the time. It takes, I would say, on average, we kill an elk every 4 or 5 encounters. meaning we're probably about 20-25% efficient on, and by an encounter, I mean calling that bull into bow range, and still things happen in there. And I've heard people say, "Well, I called in 18 bulls last year and didn't get a shot." Well, there's something wrong with your setup, or there's something that's keeping you from getting a shot. And then I've heard other people say, "I only heard one bull all last season," or "I didn't hear any elk." Well, that's in your lack of going and finding a new area that's happening. So there's a lot of things that go into that, but at the end of the day, I want more encounters. And the more encounters I can have, the higher my hopes of filling that tag are.
So September 15th to 21st, the words you would leave the audience with is be mobile, be aggressive.
Be mobile, be aggressive, and do not go home early this week. This is this is not the week to throw in the towel. This is the week where tomorrow is going to be better than yesterday.
Yeah. Well, this is fun, Corey. Picking your brain on all this. You're such a mountain of gold here, and I appreciate you sharing that with the audience. Elk101.com. People have heard me. I have it on my phone here. I got it pulled up. They're hearing me talk about the article that you have out there. It's a great article for 2025. I'd suggest everybody do it. And if you really want to get into it, Corey's University of Elk Hunting is out there on Outdoor Class. Go to outdoorclass.com. Promo code Elk Talk 15. I
Yep.
think saves them 15%. Isn't that what the 15 is all about?
Well, it's 15% off of the price that's already reduced, I think
Right.
$30.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
know.
already reduced 30% right now. If they go out there, it's going to save them another 15. So I don't know. I should know this is a $49 or $59 that they can sign up for. It's regularly $99. So use code Elk Talk 15. You're going to save a whole bunch of money, and the amount of material you're going to get. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on rut hunting, which right now we're leading into the peak rut. There's a lot of tactics in there, a lot of strategy, but things are going to change fast here, and it's going to go to from pre-rut to peak rut to post-rut in a matter of weeks. And Randy's got a lot of information on hunting elk in the post-rut in the late season. There's mule deer hunting, antelope hunting. There's just a bunch of information there. So for the price, you're getting priceless amounts of information.
Yeah. Well, folks, thanks for being here. We get to talk about the peak of the peak rut next week, September 22nd. We're going to add a day. We're going to take you to the end of September. We're going to September 30th because some states close on September 30th for archery, and we'll round it up a day. And if we decide
That's
we
right.
want to get into October, I'll leave that up to Corey. But so thanks, Corey. Thanks, folks. Appreciate y'all being here. Good luck out there.